Alright, so welcome everybody to this beautiful long video. This video is probably going to be very long, in which I'm going to be ranking every single 2.2 trigger. And what do you know? Look how many there are. This is absolutely insane. And this is not even every single trigger. Like, okay, I just said every single trigger, but this is the triggers that we know about as of right now. And I'm not only going to rank them, but I'm also going to give like a brief explanation of what every single one of them does and also why I placed them in this specific ranking. So let's start off with the advanced random trigger. What this basically does is it allows you to easily activate a random group of your choice, and you can also set up like the probability of each one. Wait, I have a video for it. Wait, look at this. This is a video on Robtop's channel that is currently unlisted, and he also showcased this trigger, and as you can see, the interface looks very clean, and you can basically set up how many group IDs you want to have and the chances for them to be activated, which is a very cool idea in my opinion. I think this is a quite decent trigger. However, I can see this being used in very bad scenarios. Like, we have to have a bunch of rules on how to use the advanced random trigger or the random trigger, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. I think advanced random can be very useful to maybe have, like, in platformer mode, you can have like two parts that you can go into, but each attempt it's like randomized on which part you will end up. Or it can be used to like randomize colors and stuff. However, I've seen a lot of comments of people wanting to add like an impossible part at the end of the top one demon and make like a 99% chance of this wall being disappeared. So we'd have a 1% chance of dying at the last 99%, which is kind of weird usage of it. So yeah, this could be a little bit controversial, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm just gonna place it in tier C. I like this trigger, but yeah, who knows? I hope nothing too bad happens once 2.2 really... Wait, I want to place it somewhere in here like that. And next up we have the random trigger. I don't think anybody is going to be using the random trigger. This one is basically, it has the same purpose as the advanced random trigger, but it's much harder to set up with multiple groups. I think it's easier to set up two groups with this trigger than this trigger, but if you want to have like multiple groups randomized, then you better use the advanced random trigger. So this one I don't think is going to be quite as used, so I'm just going to place it in E, but it's basically the same thing. So now let's move on to the camera zoom trigger, which basically just zooms out the camera. This is a beautiful addition to 2.2. I think this can be really useful for like boss fights, because I usually, when I made boss fights in GD, I always felt like the boundaries were too small, and this fixes the issue. And many people said that we should have had this since 2017, which I totally agree with. And this is overall like a very good trigger when you go like really fast with the 4x speed. You can like zoom out the camera so you can see a lot of stuff. Very good for sight reading. So I would say this trigger is probably going to be going on to the A tier. And yeah, by the way, you guys can also participate in this in the comment section. You guys can tell me what you think about each trigger and if you have like any favorite ones. And I'm just going to go ahead and continue with the touch trigger. This is a 2.1 trigger, but there are a lot of changes in it. Just like the spawn, rotate, pulse, and these, like pretty much every single 2.1 trigger. They have like a lot of changes in 2.2, which is why I decided to also include them in here. So the touch trigger can be really useful for mini games. And in platformer mode, I can imagine that it's gonna be one of the most used trigger ever. And I think this trigger is very cool. However, I think it's a little bit too difficult to set up, so I don't really use it. But I think in 2.2 we're gonna be forced to use it, because it's gonna be really powerful. It basically just does something once you touch the screen. And in 2.2 I think you can like enable hold mode or once you release or stuff like that. But some of these things are already in this trigger, which we're gonna talk about in a bit, actually like very late, but we're gonna have to see. And this trigger, this is not actually a trigger, this is a checkpoint. It's used for platformer levels. You can like checkpoint yourself, and once you die you can just restart from that checkpoint, which I think is such an important addition to 2.2. I think this is easily going S tier here, because this is without this, I think platformer mode would be a nightmare. Imagine having like a really difficult part that you finally pass and there's no checkpoints. However, I can imagine that so many extreme demons are not going to have checkpoints at all, which I think is going to be a nightmare because I really don't like having to repeat certain parts in platformer levels. I mean, in normal mode, it's fine, but not in platformer level. No. Let's not do that, okay? Everybody that's going to make a 2.2 level in platformer mode, please add a lot of checkpoints. We can see in Robtop's sneak peek, he pretty much, like, look at this, like 11 seconds into the level and there's already a checkpoint. Something like this, I think, there's another checkpoint. You see like 2 checkpoints in this small level. I think this is how we should use the checkpoints as well. So yeah, I think it's a S tier, easily, very important trigger. And now the time mode trigger. The time mode trigger is so amazing. The time mode trigger allows for some insanely dramatic parts. Like I've used it in my recreating Deadlocked in 2.2 video on my main channel, and it's just beautiful. We can see also Robtop used it in Dash. Here we can see that he slowed down the game. Look at this, Geometry Dash. This is just so dramatic and so amazing. I think this is by far the most dramatic trigger that we ever have on this whole list, because I think so many boss fights are gonna use it, and for like certain drops it's just gonna feel amazing. So this, is it an S plus or should I just put it in S? I think it's gonna be a revolutionary, but let's just put it in S. Okay, not quite S plus, but let's just put it in here. And next up we have the stop trigger. This basically stops a group ID. For example, if like the background is pulsing every like 2 seconds, you can stop it with this trigger. However, we also have the pause and we also have resume trigger, which are basically the same, but once you pause them, you can also unpause them. But with the stop trigger, once you stop it, it doesn't really start again. So, where do I think this trigger belongs? This is a good question. I think this is going to be like most of these triggers, we're going to have to take a look at how important they're going to be for platformer mode and how much they are going to change the game. So the stop trigger, I think, is going to be quite used, however, not that much. So I'm just going to place it in the C tier here because I think the pause and resume are going to be, actually, let's go D because pause and resume are going to be quite more useful than the stop trigger. So I'm just gonna place these two probably in C tier, or actually let's go B tier here, because I think these are also really useful once you like want to like stop a platform from moving, and then you can resume it after you click a button, for example, in the game, or get a key or something. And this is a very useful trigger for the platformer mode. I can see we have not gotten any F tier, so we're gonna have to see which one is gonna be the first. And then we have the stop jump trigger. This is such a useful trigger for transitions in normal levels, because as we all know, like, people have the weirdest transitions. Maybe they are cool looking, but once you click, you mostly will die. So this trigger is gonna prevent that from happening, which I think is very cool. However, other than that, I can't really see it being that useful. Maybe in like story levels or something. Yeah, not really that much about this trigger. I'm just gonna place it in D tier here. I think D tier is fair. And next up we have the start position. The start position is such a useful trigger, like we all know that. And in 2.2, I think there are gonna be a bunch more options to it, but I'm not quite sure about that. So yeah, I'm just gonna place it in A tier here. Then we have the spawn trigger. The spawn trigger is probably gonna be the most used trigger in 2.2 because of platformer mode. We can take a look at the trailer that Robtop has uploaded, and we can see that this is now the spawn trigger. I think, I'm not quite sure actually, because this looks way different than it is right now, but I'm pretty sure it already has a lot of changes. So I think this trigger just alone, for being such a useful trigger for platformer mode, I think is a very important thing. So I'm just gonna place it up in the S tier. This is very useful for like looping stuff, and also playing a bunch of, or activating a bunch of groups after a certain time. This is very useful for platformer levels. For example, you can like click and like jump on top of a button in the level, and you can say after 10 minutes, close this door or something like that. I think this would be very useful. And now we have the rotate trigger. The rotate trigger is also in 2.1, and it does have an option that says rotate, follow player rotation, which basically follows the player's rotation. And Robtop has used it in some previews, and I think they looked very cool. And I can imagine how this is going to be really useful for like animating things, like you can land on a block and then it rotates kind of like that, or for really dramatic boss fights. This can be really useful, or just rotating blocks in platformer mode. This is very useful as well. But yeah, I'm just going to place it A tier here, nothing way too special, but it's really important. So, and then we have the pulse trigger. The pulse trigger is also a very nice trigger. It's a 2.1 trigger. However, it doesn't really have that much impact on how the game is gonna change. It doesn't really do anything much, and yeah, it does lead to some more dramatic drop parts, I'm gonna say. But yeah, nothing really too special. I'm gonna place it in the D tier. Next up, we have the pickup trigger, which basically can increase a counter. You can have like a counter of, for example, how many coins you've collected. You can have that counter somewhere on the screen. And this can basically add or subtract from this number, which I think is also kind of useful for platformer mode. I can't really see it being useful in normal levels. However, Finger Dash did actually use that for the third coin. But now I don't think people use that much, so I don't think it's gonna change that much. I don't think it's gonna change the levels that much, to be honest. So let's go to C tier. It's important for like if you want to have like a cool level where you collect a bunch of things, like a cool platformer level where you have to collect a certain amount of keys in order to unlock a door. You can have like maze levels and stuff like that. I can imagine that happening. And then we have the on death trigger, which basically just enables a group once you die. This can either be used to like, black out the screen, which is one of the most annoying things people can use it for. And it doesn't really have that much effect on changing how the game is gonna be. You can like play a custom particle once you die, but not really that much. So I'm just gonna go ahead and this is the first F tier trigger. And next up we have the move trigger. Many people say that because of the new keyframing system, this trigger is gonna die off. However, I think this is gonna be really useful for like just simple movements. If you have a door, you want to move it upwards, you're not gonna use keyframes for that. You're probably just gonna use the normal trigger. So I think this is still gonna be useful, maybe for like rather simpler stuff in platformer mode. But I can see it being, the move triggers, like without this, the game pretty much looks boring. So I'm just gonna place it in here. This is also the first trigger that was ever added to Geometry Dash. And next up we have the instant count trigger. This is just like the count trigger. Where is it? I don't even have it on the list. Okay, let's just remove that then. Okay, next up we have the scale trigger. This trigger is also very cool. We have asked for this for so long, and we finally are about to get this trigger in Geometry Dash. This trigger is just like the rotate trigger, really. It just works. You can like scale stuff with it. It can be cool for platformer, not really that huge impact on the game, but it can be used in, it can make levels just look better, You can have like a bunch of animated things with it. So, and next up we have the camera static trigger, which is basically what it does is it basically can stop the trigger at a certain point. You can just focus the camera on like a spike, and then no matter where you move, the camera is gonna stay there. I think this is a very useful trigger. It's camera control, so it is gonna have a huge impact on the platformer levels and the whole game overall. I think it can also be used in normal levels actually, because we've seen how Robtop has used it in Sub-Zero levels and it turned out very cool. I think this is an A tier easily. And next up we have the shake trigger. I think the shake trigger is one of the best triggers because in 2.2 it's going to be used way more, especially for platformer mode. Because in platformer mode you can like have cannons that shoot at you, and it would just feel so lame if the camera doesn't shake once that bullet reaches like a floor or something. And this shake trigger can change it a lot. Like I've made platformer levels myself with like cannons and stuff, and it just is weird having like the bullet touch something and not have a huge screen shake. So I think this is a very, very useful trigger actually. And it can also be used for heavy drops in Geometry Dash normal levels. So easily S tier, this is a very useful trigger. I like how this is forming actually. This looks pretty cool. Let me just move this guy a little bit like that. Yep. Then we have the reverse and reverse direction. What these are basically, reverse is if you're going to the right in normal mode and you touch this trigger, you're gonna be going to the left. However, if you were going to the left and you touch it, you will go to the right. So it basically flips your direction no matter where you are going. However, this one can switch your direction only in one direction. So for example, if you're going right and this one is placed like this and you touch it, you'll go left. However, if you're like going left right now and you place this trigger like that, if you touch it, nothing is gonna happen because you are already moving to the left. So it basically just changes the direction to wherever this guy is pointing, but I'm not quite sure about this information, okay? So I'm just gonna put it out there. I think this one's gonna be way more useful. I mean, these guys can't be really used in platformer mode, only in normal levels, so I really like the gameplay once you like go backwards. However, for these ones, we're gonna really need very readable transitions because I've seen some 2.2 levels and some of them are just weird and not really sight readable, which I think is a very terrible thing to do. I'm gonna have to do a lot of tutorials on how to correctly make a cool looking transition that is readable and at the same time allows you to like go backwards and stuff. So if this trigger is used correctly, I think it can be very nice. I'm not gonna lie on this, so let me just put it in probably not too special. So let's put it on the C tier. It's above average, something like that. Not for platformer mode, so yeah. This one, I think this is easily E tier because it's not, I think people are just gonna use this one. I don't think anybody's gonna use that one, to be honest. And next up, we have the song trigger. And next up, the song trigger is gonna be so ridiculously useful. RobTop did not want this to be in 2.2, but then it just ended up being in 2.2. So this allows you to change the song in the level, I'm assuming. And it can also allow you to like move forward in the song or skip certain parts in the song. I think this is a very useful trigger because I think so many songs just repeat the beat over and over again, and it's just impossible making a cool looking parts for it every single second, which I think is kind of lame. But this one, it fixes that. You can basically skip certain parts and you can just start with the drop and repeat the drop over and over again. This basically just unlocks the limits that we've had with this song. You can, for example, have boss fights that go longer than a song or shorter than a song. You have a lot of control over the song, which I think is a very useful trigger. Next up, we have the options trigger. This trigger, many of you guys don't know what this is. This is basically it. It can hide the player, it can show the player, it can hide the ground, it can show the ground, it can unlink dual gravity, it can, yeah, I'm not quite sure what else, but it can like disable the middle ground. It does a bunch of things. I think these ones are useful, but it doesn't really change that much in the game, so I'm just gonna put it D tier here. Nothing too special, but it's useful, you know. We're gonna have to use this every now and then. Not really too special, but yeah, let's just put it. D tier is enough. And then we have the gradient trigger. Gradient trigger is an amazing trigger. It basically allows you to have gradient of 2 colors as of right now, and you can have it multiply with the color that you are applying it to. You can make it additive, you can make it invert. You have a lot of options, and you can also link it to a bunch of points only. You can have gradient that only appears in certain areas, and I've seen some mind-blowing things with this trigger. And I think if you use this trigger correctly, even if you use it in like normal levels, you're gonna have some very, very nice looking effects. So is this S plus or is it not? Yeah, I think this is gonna go S plus actually, because this trigger, I think if Sputniks alone gets his hands on this, it's gonna be Jover, I'm pretty sure. He's gonna blow our minds. I mean, our minds are already really blown away by what he's been doing in 2.1, and giving this to him in 2.2 is gonna, you know, it's gonna push the boundaries a little bit. Let me just put it that way. Next up, we have the follow player Y, which basically it's just, I don't know if people do people even use this anymore? This is for like making things follow the player. Why? Like how far you are from the ceiling or how far you are from the ground and stuff. Your Y value in the level basically, but it can also like delay stuff, so things follow you in a bit of a delay. I think this trigger is gonna die in 2.2. I don't think anybody is gonna have to use that after they see the upcoming trigger that's called the advanced follow trigger, which we're gonna go into in a bit. Oh, here we have the normal follow trigger. This is already in 2.1, but yeah, I don't know if anybody's gonna use that anymore. Maybe for like, this is just like the move trigger. I think people are gonna use this just for like really simple stuff, and when it comes to really complicated stuff, they're gonna rather go for the advanced follow trigger. So the follow trigger, yeah, probably F tier. Nobody's gonna use that, pretty sure. Actually, let's go E tier. Maybe people will use it a little bit, okay? Not really a revolutionary or anything, so. Then we have the shader triggers, oh my god. So this first trigger, what it does is it basically can set up on which layer you want these shader triggers to have an effect. For example, you can say you place this trigger down and you just say, I want to have an effect only on the background, or I want to have an effect on the player. And we can also see this in one of Robtop's levels called Dash. We can see here he used the invert trigger to only apply on the player. You can see the colors are completely different, and that's because he used this trigger, he placed this down and set it to only affect the player. This is very useful. Everybody's gonna use this before using any of these guys, so I think this is very useful. Probably A tier, nothing way too special, but overall the shaders I think are amazing addition to 2.2. They're gonna allow for some insanely dramatic parts, and especially if the song goes really well with it, I think it's gonna be mind-blowing. So the first shader trigger we have is the split screen trigger shader actually, and what it does is it basically splits the screen according to the values you give it, so you can like split the screen between 4 sections or 5 or 8 or whatever, and it can be really cool. I can pull up a video real quick. Look at this. This is what it basically does. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah. Can be really confusing, as you can see, and you can go forever. Here we can see an amazing usage of this. Look at this. I think this trigger should only be used in transitions and not for normal gameplay, because it could get really confusing, and yeah, I really hope people are gonna use this correctly. So nothing that I like too much. It can be used cool, so I'm just gonna put it like C tier. I think C tier is fair. And next up we have the Shockwave shader, which is a beautiful shader that basically allows you to have like a shockwave effect, basically. It's pretty much self-explanatory. No, but this trigger is actually really useful, and it can be, it's just a cool effect. I'm just gonna put it out there, it's a cool effect. We're gonna just judge these depending on how good the effects are. So I think this one's like a B tier. Let's go in here. Shock line, basically just like the shock wave, but this time it's just a line. Yeah, I think this is a little bit less useful than the shockwave trigger. I'm just gonna place it in C tier. And then we have the Sepia trigger, the Sepia shader, which I think is a very cool shader. It basically makes the screen go like this. Wait, you see? This is Sepia, boom. And this is no Sepia. I think this is a very cool, if this is used correctly, this can be very beautiful. Let's go A tier. I don't think any shader is going to be on the S tier. Oh no, maybe I have a trigger in mind that's probably going to be in the S tier. A shader, I mean, I keep confusing these two words. And then we have the radial blur. I don't really like blur effects. I'm just going to put it in F tier. I don't think people are going to use it that much even. Yeah, and then we have the pixelate. Pixelate can be cool, but please don't use it randomly. Please just pixelate the whole screen and then just do weird stuff. So let's just put it on E tier. I think E tier is good. Actually, let's go F tier because I don't really like pixelated stuff. However, pixelated blocks are pretty cool. And then we have the pinch shader, which is also a very nice shader. It's basically like the opposite of bulge, which is my favorite trigger, I think. The pinch shader is a very nice one, so I'm gonna place it in A tier. A tier, very cool. Very nice for like drop parts. I think this is very useful. Then we have the motion blur again. Blur and stuff all goes into F. And then we have the lens circle. The lens circle is easily going into S tier. Just like I showed you in like Dash, how the screen kind of goes like this. Geometry Dash. You see this black effect that comes and goes? Look at this Geometry Dash. Boom. This is just so dramatic and so cool. Deserves an S tier for sure. And then we have the invert colors. If used like in here, can be very cool. However, if you invert the whole screen, I don't think that's going to be that cool. So let me just place it in D tier. It can be cool if people use it correctly. Next up, we have the hue. Oh, this is probably going B tier as well. This is a very nice shader. I really like it. You can like change the hue, which is basically like doing this, you see? Boom, it's like changing the colors on 360 degrees, which can be really useful. I'm really excited for this as well. And we have the grayscale. Grayscale is, I think it's something like this one. It can like, yeah, you can see now everything is like cyan. You can make it blue or, you know, a bunch of other colors, which can be applied on the screen, can be applied on the player only. Very cool thing. I think nothing too much. Let's go B tier. I think B tier is enough for the grayscale. Then we have the glitch effect. Glitch effect can be used very annoyingly. So F tier. Let me know if you disagree with any of these. You probably will. Edit color. I don't know what edit color does. I honestly have no clue. So I'm just gonna put it in. Yeah, I think this is the first one. This is the first one for I don't know. And next up we have the this is also F. It basically adds like this glitchy chromatic thingy, like this one basically, just an F tier. And we have the bulge trigger. Not the trigger, the bulge shader. Yes, my dudes. Which I'm gonna show you in a bit. I mean, I have this shader literally recreated in 2.2, in 2.1, which is why I'm gonna place it in S plus tier. This is a very nice one. If it is used correctly, I think this can be very nice. You see, this is like the bulge trigger. It's a very nice shader, not a trigger. It's like shaking the screen like that. Boom, boom. Can be very cool if it's used on the background. I think it's gonna be cool. So yeah, S plus, like I said. And then we have the offset. This is so beautiful. Okay, we are back at the camera triggers. Camera control again, very nice for platformer levels and also for normal levels. I think you can like, instead of zooming out, you can just offset the camera in order to see more stuff, which I think is very cool. So I'm gonna place it probably A tier. I think this is a very, very useful trigger, especially for like platformer levels. You can like offset the camera left, right. You can show them the level and then you can play the, oh my god, now we have the arrow trigger. This is probably one of my favorite triggers, probably going S tier. This basically allows you to go on walls, can be very dramatic and very epically used. So I'm just gonna place it in S tier. Very, very cool thing. This is probably the trigger that took Robtop the longest to develop because he's still having issues with it, even though it's been under development for like not 6 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, something like that. And next up, we have this force. This is called the force. It's not a trigger, it's just a block that you can place. It basically affects the player. In platformer mode, once you like reach it, it kind of boosts you up and down, you know, stuff like that. It depends on where you aim it. You can like aim it like this, and then you have like a speed boost, basically. I think this can be really useful for platformer mode. You can like aim it somewhere and maybe like make a custom looking fan, and you are like basically being pushed from the fan away. I think this is a very nice one as well. So let's go A tier. Not gonna have that much of an impact, but yeah, A tier is deserved. And then we have the camera edge trigger. This basically allows you to like have limits to the camera. You can like limit how far the camera can go to the right, to the top, bottom, and left. And I've used this a lot in my normal levels, not in platformer levels, but it can also be really useful for a platformer. So let's go S tier. This is a very nice one as well. And then we have the counter trigger, which does not exist at all. What the heck even is this? This is in 2.1. This is like a bug that we do have the what? Okay, I'm confused right now. I thought we don't have the count trigger. Okay, let me just place it somewhere without any commentary. Let's go average. Okay, that was commentary, but whatever. Okay, then we have the collision. The collision trigger basically allows you to activate certain groups once two things collide with each other. Very useful, very cool. For platformer levels, this is probably going to be super duper useful, and also for mini games. So I'm just going to place it S tier. We can see we have a lot of S tier thingies, which is understandable. Also, and this is the block that is used for the collision. So Doesn't really have a rating. I'm just gonna put it in here like that. Let's go like this. And next up we have the camera mode. This basically allows you to, if you are like in the ship, you can use this trigger to make this ship a free fly mode. You can like fly out the boundaries without like the grounds, which I think is fairly good. It's gonna change a lot of levels. So let's go B tier. It's gonna be really useful, but nothing way too special, which is why B tier I think is enough. And then we have the end trigger. This basically is probably only gonna be used in platformer levels. What this does is it can be set as like touch trigger, and once you touch it, the level is over. You can have like custom endings for platformer levels, very cool. Like I said, most of these things are just platformer focused, so I can understand that. GID is going to be a platformer level, platformer game, what am I saying? This is probably A tier, very useful. Let's go B tier. It's useful, but I don't think it's gonna feel that different. I mean, I don't think people are gonna know that this trigger exists. It just level ends and boom, you just use this trigger. Wow. Okay, I think B tier is enough. And then we have this guy, which I have already ranked. So let's just rank it one more time, I guess. These are two separate triggers actually, but I don't know what they do. One of them is different than the other, and I have no clue what they do. Here we have RobTop. I'm really curious, why are there two options triggers? They are different. And this was back 3 years ago now, and he said, sometimes I reuse textures for a new trigger if I haven't done the art for it. So this is a different one, and I'm just gonna place it in I don't know, so people get confused why this trigger is in here and in here. But you guys that have watched until here are pretty cool, so you guys know. And then we have the advanced follow trigger. I'm not sure if this is going to be an S or an S plus, because what this does is it allows for rockets to follow you, and it has so many settings. Like it has maybe like 20 or 30 properties that you can change with it. It's really flexible to work with. So I'm gonna go S plus actually. This is gonna be very, very useful also for normal boss fights, because this also allows for randomness in certain things, which I think is gonna be very nice. And next up we have the camera rotate, which is super duper cool. This basically allows for the camera rotation thingy. Easily S tier. This is also very nice when it's used with the time warp trigger and also the lens circle. This can be really, really cool. I think this trigger is probably the most underrated so far, but I think people are really gonna know the effect of it once 2.2 comes out, just like with the shake and time warp trigger. Very nice stuff. And then we have the camera guide, which I never really understood. This is basically something that can only be seen in the editor. Once you place this trigger, there are like lines on where the edges of the screen are, but it never really worked. So yeah, I don't know, man. And here we are, arrived at the area triggers. These triggers are very revolutionary. I think they are going to change Geometry Dash a lot, especially for platformer mode. Again, platformer mode very heavily focused on with these triggers. So the area tint trigger, I think this is very useful for like torches, just like we saw in the 2.2 trailer. However, it can also be used for simple background effects. I can see this being used like that as well. And okay, let me just explain what this even does. It can change the color of certain objects depending on how far they are from either the player or an object that you select. You can select like an object and then move it around, and then depending on how far these objects are from this object that you selected, this specific object, then they get colored basically. So very cool stuff, probably S tier as well. Look at this, we have 2 yellow things, nice. And next up we have the area scale, which is basically the same, but instead of recoloring things, it scales it up and down depending on what you want. This one, yeah, scaling them up and down, not really that useful. However, I don't know, man, like it can be really cool. So I'm just gonna place it in A tier because I don't know that much about it, but I think it has a lot of potential, I'm not gonna lie. And next up, the area rotate, basically the same thing. So yeah, just going to the A tier. I can't really think of very useful things or really cool looking effects that you can do with it, but the community is probably gonna blow my mind again, so let me just put it out there so I don't regret. And the area move is probably going to be an S tier in here. Very, very useful, and it's going to affect the game a lot, as many people have said from 2.2. And the area fade, the same thing, but just changing the opacity of objects. So I think this is also S tier because it's really, really useful. You can see S tier has the most triggers. This is insane. Okay, I did not expect that. Then we have the animate trigger. The animate trigger is going to be changed in 2.2 a lot because you can also animate particles with it. You can have like a particle of an explosion, for example, and you can play it with this trigger. Or you can animate the monsters as well. So I would say like probably B, nothing way too special, but it's gonna change GG just because of the, you know, particle system. And we have the alpha trigger. This changes the opacity of certain objects. Yeah, very useful as well. Just go B tier. This is already in 2.1. So then the gravity trigger. This basically changes the gravity of the player. You can make like really low gravity as if like you're on Mars or something. I don't think this is going to be that useful, to be honest. I don't think people are going to use it that much. But I can see why Robtop decided to add it. It's super easy to add, I'm pretty sure. So let's just put it in C tier just because of the color. It's like green perfectly. Okay, next up we have the rotate enter. This is different than this one. I know it looks fairly the same, but in 2.2 I think it's gonna look something like this. Yeah, it's gonna have like this rectangle in it, just like these guys. So I'm just gonna place them in here so we don't confuse them with each other. Yeah, like that, something like that. Oh, one of them is missing, I think, or two. Yeah, we have like scale move and scale whatever, scale fade as well. Okay, it doesn't matter. They're all pretty much the same thing. So what these ones do is basically, wait, let me see. What these ones do are basically what you're gonna see right now. Look at this. In Stereo Madness, if you take a look at the very right of the screen, you can see that the objects are being scaled up, you know? You see how they are coming into the screen, they are like being scaled up like that. This effect can be changed manually in 2.2, and now you can see they are going up and down. From the right they're going up, and then they're going down on the left. Down. Yeah, basically this thing, you can change the rotation, the scale. This stops everything, and we also have the coloring. I think all of these are actually gonna go into the same category, the same ranking. So I'm just gonna place them all together. I think people are gonna use them a little bit, just like with like these objects. They are not gonna be used that much, but they can be cool if used correctly. They can be cool for like very OG looking levels. I think these can be cool. Maybe like let's go D tier. Nothing that useful, but can be cool. And then we have the middle ground. This allows you to move the middle ground up and down, and maybe you can also change it. You can change the middle ground, maybe. I have no idea. Not really that useful. And then it's not gonna have like that huge impact on the game. So E tier I think is enough. Then we have the teleport trigger. This teleport trigger, what it basically does is it basically teleports you to certain group IDs. Instead of having to use like these portals to teleport, you can use this trigger. And it has a lot of options like flip gravity on teleport, or, you know, change speed, or like have a force on them and stuff like that. So this is very useful for platformer mode. So probably, I think B tier is enough for this one. Yeah, B tier is cool. And then we have this F block. What it does is it basically allows you to stick to blocks that are above you. And in this level you can see here, he lands on this block, and so his gravity changes, and now boom, change again. He's using the F block, which I think is gonna maybe not that cool because it can be used blindly, and so we can have no idea what's going on with no indication and stuff. I mean, Robtop did it quite well with like these green looking things with the particles on them. But yeah, I don't know. I think E tier is enough for this F block. And next up we have the Edit SFX. This is an amazing thing. Look at where this can be used in. Look at this, Robtop made this level, which is pretty much just like music. Yeah, just like you saw, it basically allows you to make like these very cool looking things. It's not only used for like making custom music, but also for like platformer levels once you like want to play a sound effect. Not quite sure what you can do with it because we already have the SFX thing. We have the SFX and Edit SFX, so I'm not quite sure about that. So let's just place them both in, I would say, like F tier. So yeah, these triggers are gonna revolutionize everything. I think these triggers are probably the most important ones because we know platformer mode is such a cool game mode, but it would be terrible to have it without the sound effects. So revolutionary for sure. And also can do a bunch of settings with it, like reverb and, you know, a bunch of stuff like that. And then we have the time basically. And yep, next up we have the event time, which is basically exactly the same as time, which is I have no clue. And then we have the control time, which is, yeah, it's the same thing. Then we have the edit item. I can only speculate what this could mean. And I said that you can change the group IDs of certain objects or like the layering live. So if that's the case, probably S tier, but I have no idea if this is what it does. We're gonna have to see. I just put it in here. And then we have the item compare. This is very, very useful for the platformer mode. You can like compare certain items. You can compare if the time is equal to X or, you know, if the attempts are equal to X. So this is probably gonna go to S tier. This is very, very useful. Item compare goes to S plus, actually, not even only S. So then we have the item persists. People have said that this may only allow you to, you know, have access to values in different attempts, but I'm not quite sure about that. So here we can see a message from RobTop on what this trigger does. And I've talked about that in my previous video, and I've said that it may be a little bit controversial, you know, it may lead to a bunch of problems, but I think if used correctly, this can be very nice. So I don't know, I feel bad about this because it can be in like S or S plus, but it can also be in F tier because it can be used terribly. So I'm just gonna put it, actually let's just put it in here. I think this placement like that is the perfect placement. Actually, let's just make a bunch of places for the S tier. I think this is pretty nice. And then we have the background speed, which basically just allows you to change the speed of the background. Nothing way too special, but I mean, this is something that we should have control of, which I think is super duper useful. So let's just put it in C tier. But it's not gonna like change levels dramatically. And then we have the middle ground speed, basically the same thing, but for the middle ground, I think even less noticeable because yeah, middle ground is not really that useful, and we also can't see it that much. So, and then we have the sequence trigger. This trigger is probably going to be the most used trigger in platformer mode. Just like I said in my previous video, this trigger is going to be amazing. It's easily going S plus, a very cool trigger, which I think can be very, very useful to like do a bunch of sequences. For example, if you want to like have a cannon that shoots stuff, and then you have a bunch of things that you have to do, and between each action there is a delay of time, and this basically allows you to do everything but quite easily as far as I know. So yeah, this is why it's going on to S plus tier, because yeah, it's gonna make things way easier. And then we have this spawned particle. I have no idea what this is. Does this like spawn a particle out of nowhere? You can like edit the particle and it just adds an object. I have no idea what this is. I'm just gonna place it in I don't know because I have no idea. And then we have the reset. This trigger is actually has been explained by Viprin himself. It can reset certain objects like collectibles and checkpoints, so they can be collected again, like first time. Thanks to this dude, he shared with this information with me from Viprin that he has said in his own public Discord server. So this can be really useful. However, I don't think people are gonna use it that much because who wants to like reset checkpoints? I mean, it's something that we should have control of, so I think not that. I think A tier is enough for this one. You can like reset a bunch of counters and stuff, very nice. And then we have the changed background. This changes the background. It can be really useful actually. Now that I think about it, you can like change the background to like a castle themed background instead of having to make your own. And for normal parts, you can have normal looking parts, which I think is a very cool thing. Yeah, let's just place it in here. Very cool trigger. And change ground. Yeah, I think all of these go pretty much in the... actually, these ones are not that visible. So I mean, maybe the middle ground is gonna go in C tier. But I think the G changing the ground is pretty much here. Yeah, I think like that. And then we have the gameplay offset. This is GP P offset. This is not something else. This is gameplay offset. It basically allows you to have control over how the camera moves in platformer mode, because the camera moves automatically once you move to the left or right, and you can have control over that in 2.2. It can be useful and adjusted a little bit, you know, nothing way too special. However, I would say like a C tier is enough. And then we have the keyframing trigger. I don't know what this does, but I've heard a lot of good stuff about it, that you can animate so many things and make them really smooth. So I'm just gonna put it in S+, because it sounds amazing for boss fights and just overall making cool looking movements for platformer mode. We have seen that people have made like, you know, real looking physics and of like moving blocks and falling down and stuff like that, which I think is a very cool thing. And then we have the event trigger, which basically activates a group if the player lands, if it, you know, jumps, if it transitions to something. Very useful trigger as well. I'm just gonna place it in S tier, probably. Very useful. I think this can be really useful if you want to like make like custom particles once the player lands. I think something like this can be really cool. And you can also change the particle, which I think is also very nice. So these are the triggers that I was talking about. This one we have already done. Then we have the edit area. Oh wait, no, that's different. These ones are different. You see, these ones are edit area fade, and these ones are rotate enter. These are completely different. I should probably make this. You know what? I'm just gonna place like a rectangle on top of them, like something like this maybe. Yeah, I mean, these triggers are so similar that we have to like, you know, change the textures on them. But these ones, I think what they do is yeah, I think I know what they do. Look at this. What they do is a certain thing that I'm gonna show you right now, gamers. Yeah, for now, I have no idea what these do. We're gonna have to see. Oh my god, we are almost done with the triggers ranking. So then we have the middle ground. You can have control over the middle ground. And I'm not sure if this is the same thing as this one, but the textures changed. So I'm just gonna place it in, I don't know, as well. Somewhere like that. I think is pretty cool. And then we have the UI. This allows you to edit the UI and also place objects on top of the UI, which I think is going to be super duper useful. I mean, you have so many useful triggers, especially for platformer mode, just because this is just super duper useful. You can like place a timer on the screen and show you how much time you have until like the door closes or something like that. Then we have the instant collision, which we have analyzed in my previous video. It's a very cool trigger as well. I think this should go the same as the normal collision. However, I don't think it's gonna seem that different. It can be used really, it can be like really useful for mini games, and state is something that can be put in this tier, I think. And then we have the final trigger. It's called the edit song. This allows you to like edit the song and stuff. I think this just allows you to like make it loop. I mean, you already have the song trigger. I have no idea what this does. So I'm just gonna, I think there's one more spot in here. So this is perfect for this one. We have a lot of things in, I don't know, that's wild. And this one, I'm gonna place it in here like that. And this is the full tier list rankings that I made. I think this looks amazing. Let me know what you guys think, how you guys would rank these guys. Yeah, I think this is, let me know if you think any of my rankings were wrong. I am pretty sure that most of the things I have put in here deserve this place. Probably not many of you are gonna agree with this or these three, but I think these ones you guys have to agree with it, especially this and this. These ones are probably the best ones. And yeah, I think this is it for this video. Make sure to slap that subscribe button and also the like. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye. Bye bye.